In college football 26, we finally have the ability to build our roster through the transfer portal, something that was not available to us in college football 25. Now that we actually have access to it and it is a viable option for us to build our program, I'm going to show you how to effectively dominate the transfer portal. Now, it may seem kind of obvious when you're talking about this, but so many little details go overlooked that you're leaving stuff on the table. And I'm using Maryland for a specific purpose, and that's to show you that you can really do this from a litany of different options. It doesn't just have to be the top of the top teams, right? You can do this at those mid-level Power 4 teams, or even the top end of the group of 5. That's going to be a little bit tougher, and we'll get into why in a little bit. But these specific schools allow you the capability to do that while still having that kind of rebuild feel. So the very first thing that you're going to want to do is go over your coachability screen. When you do this, you want to start as a recruiter. This is super, super, super important. And why do you want to start as a recruiter? Well, the recruiting skill tree isn't as good as it was last year, but if you want to win through the transfer portal, this is a very important thing to focus on. You see in that third tier, in that tier 3 ranking, it says quarterback transfers are more interested. That is across all positions. That means all positions in the transfer portal are going to have more initial interest in your program than other programs. Do you know how big that is in terms of trying to win in the portal? Why is that big? Because you have 4 weeks to effectively win all of your recruiting battles. And you only have so many points in the offseason. So you have to be able to divide and conquer and win in, big ways and win quickly. This allows you to cut out that initial period of trying to garner interest in guys that already have interest from other programs. This is going to allow you to immediately see where you rank in the top 2 or top 3, but mostly in the top 2 of those guys and who to go after. You won't even have to worry about, how am I going to get into this race? You're going to start in the race, and that's super important. So you need to identify early on in your dynasty where you want to attack, what position groups you want to attack, and really bring to your team through the transfer portal. Okay, so by the end of the season, we ended up getting 84 points, so we're actually going to have plenty to hit all of the portal stuff, and this is going to be it's going to be nice to show you what a completely maxed out initial interest in portal guys will do for you. The second step after you just become a recruiting archetype coach is you have to win. And I know that sounds super obvious. It's like a duh. Obviously, I need to win, right? But the reason why you need to win is because so many players' deal breakers are decided on things that are affected by how much you win, right? When you talk about championship contender, coach prestige, brand exposure, even pro potential, those things are all affected by how often you're able to win. The few things that aren't are like play style. That one, you have to play a certain way to have access to those guys. But when you're talking about this stuff on the field that guys are going to care about, winning is going to affect all of the most important things. And it's why it's so important that you do that. And I know it sounds super obvious, but you have to do those things. 8-4 is not going to cut it for a lot of those guys at the top end of the portal that you want to get. The next thing that you need to do, so step number 3 essentially, is understand why guys are going to transfer. So I kind of already broke this down. But when you look at the reason guys are going to transfer, and we can look at it here with my players leaving screen. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 players in the transfer portal after going to the college football playoff. Right? This is something that every single program is seeing. And these are guys that are, really high up there in terms of overall. My starting running back is going to transfer because of playing style. We don't run the ball enough for him. That's fine, right? That is something that we cannot control. Brand exposure, though, that's something that by winning more often, you're able to affect. Right now, ours is a B-. He needs a B+. So that's something as you go on through your dynasty, you will be able to affect that by winning more, because the more you win, the more brand exposure you are going to get. And in the recruiting page, you'll be able to see all of your team grades and see what affects them and how you can improve them, or things to avoid that will potentially downgrade them from, where you're at currently. But as you can see, pro potential is another big one here. C+ is not good enough for a lot of these guys. So now that we've actually made it to the transfer portal, I can show you the steps after the setup process that you still need. Those are super important, and you need to understand how to get to this point. But this is where you really separate yourself as a demon in the transfer portal. So as we can see here, there are only 2 5-star prospects, and playing style is a big one for Colin Simmons, and championship contender is a big one for DJ Lagway. We unfortunately didn't make his top 8, even though we do have the A championship contender, which is what we needed. We just, obviously, you can see there are 5 schools there already. We were not one of the 5, but we did enough to get there. So championship contender is a very important one to be able to get some of these guys. As we go to the 4 stars, though, Cam Coleman is a guy that is open. We've got the championship contender tier for him, that deal breaker. Playing style for Parker Brailsford, who is, going to be a very high overall center. Fluff Bothwell, who's an elusive bruising back because we have championship contender. Weeks, because playing style. Championship contender. Right? These are some of the best players that you can possibly get. CJ Baxter down here. Right? We're not necessarily in their top 8, but we've at least given ourselves the possibility to be in there just because of the championship contender. Now, what you do have to worry about when you get these guys is, hey, they might transfer next year if you don't win. But with a guy like Roderick Kearney, all of a sudden, we're number 1 for him. Right? These are guys that we probably wouldn't have access to if we didn't do this setup and win. Winning is really the most important part. If you don't win, you're going to have a tough time getting some of these players. Another one that is kind of under the radar that I think is super important in terms of when you're picking your team is conference prestige, just because every single conference is given a specified slot. So SEC is A+, Big Ten is A. I think ACC is the A-, and then Big 12 is B+. And here's the My Schools tab, by the way. If you wanted to see what affects it, it's in that little script underneath the actual grade. But stadium atmosphere, the more you win in home games, the higher this grade goes. Brand exposure, the more you win, the more national games you get, the higher this goes. So this is what I'm talking about. The more you win, same with athletic facilities, you will see an increase in your team prestige as long as you win, right? Because by winning, it gets by winning this year, Maryland went from a 3-star program to a 4-star program. That's going to increase our athletic facilities. Okay, so now we've got 22 4-star players on our board. We want to use all 1,200 points immediately in these players. We are not messing around. The next thing that you have to do is put every single possible point you can into these players. Now, with Cam Coleman, there's a very good chance that we're going to get locked out because we didn't make his initial top 10. And I would imagine that he probably gets to his top 8 by next week. But you have the points. Go after all of these guys. Okay, now you can see exactly what we've done. Every single player on our transfer portal board, all 22 have 50 points. We have exactly 50 points to use on all of them. We spent 50 points on every single one of them. If you somehow have an excess of points because of some of your coordinator surpluses, your boosts that they give you, use as many possible points as you can on your players. If that means you have to cut some guys off of your board, then you have to make that decision because you need every single amount of points that you can go after these guys. Why is that important? Because you only have 4 weeks, like we talked about. You have 4 weeks to get these guys. You have to go hard. You cannot sit back and wait and hope that other teams don't go after them because they are going after the guys, the same guys that you are in the same fashion. So you need to put all of your points in them. Everybody got a scholarship besides these 2 on the bottom. But now when we advance the week, we can kind of see where we're at in a lot of these races. We made it with Cam Coleman. This is what I'm talking about. We are now in Cam Coleman's top 5. Listen, I don't think we'll be able to get him, but we're in his top 5 after not even being in his top 10. So just being able to win and have the ability to be in his top 5 is super important. So now we've got 150 points to use. And we're now in the top 5 for a lot of these guys. And this is to the point now where we need to start using our visits. So anybody that is a top 5 guy, so you can get there by pressing LT and going to in top 5. So all of these guys need a visit. Now we only have 150 hours left right now. Fortunately, with the new visit mechanic in the game, you can set visits for as little as 10 points. So theoretically speaking, on the most extreme end is we could set 15 visits this week. Now, I think you're only allowed a max of 4 a week, so you'd have to spread those out, but you'd have the points to do 15. So you've got to decide what guys you want to go after. Now, we barely made it for Cam Coleman here in LSU, and now we've got to get to the point where we know championship contender is big. Conference prestige is also super important to him. So we're going to take off his 50. We're going to go into hard sell. So this is another thing you have to do. You immediately, once the guy's in his top 5, and you can feasibly guess what his 3 green check marks are going to be, you have to go after him. So we know conference prestige and championship contender are his top 2. So we got to figure out what that could possibly be. Right? So we've got aspirational goals, which would give us a A-A-B combination. We also have conference legend, which would be a little bit worse for us. Or we have a Sunday player, which would be the same as the other one. Now, unfortunately for us, we have absolutely no idea what which one is going to be best for him because we only have 2 of the things scouted. So you can do a couple of things. You can soft sell and try to figure out what the best pitch for him is. You can continue to send the house and see if that'll work. Or you can sway and just hope that you eventually pick the right one. That could waste 30 points. It could be a good use. Swaying when you only have a couple of weeks to get a player is a risky decision. So I'm going to continue to send the house on him and hope that by next week we'll have an understanding of what his 3rd green check mark is. For him, I don't know if I want to schedule the visit necessarily because I think LSU is in pole position and I don't think they're going to let it up. Now, some of these other guys, I'm going to make a decision to bring them on the visit. So the issue here is that once you get to the top 5, sending the house really does not have the same effect that it does in that top 8 or before you get to the top 8. You really need to start hard selling and soft selling players if you can. Here we know exactly what George Pettaway's top 3 are. And we're going to immediately go to a hard sell, which is Sunday player, and we're going to schedule him a visit. So he's going to come on a visit next week, and we're going to do conference prestige. We're going to do a little trophy tour for him. I'm not sure how many trophies Maryland has, but we're feeling really good about getting George Pettaway. For Jaden Bellamy, we're in the same situation, except we don't know his top 3. But because we know pro potential is one of his deal breakers and we have an A in it, we will schedule that visit for pro potential. Same with Javon Robinson. His is going to be a little bit more expensive, though. So we're going to bring him on a week 2 buy. We're going to go to pro potential, and he's coming on a visit now. And you just continue to do this for the 4 weeks. It is super fast paced. You need to be paying attention every single week to best use your points. If you don't think that you can be a factor in a race, you need to get out of there. That is the biggest advice that I can give, because if you don't, you're going to have a small transfer portal class. If you're able to get out and use that 50 points elsewhere, you're going to be able to build out your transfer portal class much better and add a lot more depth. So we did get locked out of Cam. Just nobody had a shot against LSU. There was really no chance for us. And then obviously we're down bad in 2 other races, but we're doing a good job in some other areas. A lot of guys in their top 5, but we're in first place for a decent amount of guys, and we're bringing them on visits this week. So, and this is where you have to make a conscious decision on when you're going to start spending 40 points, because Tennessee has passed us because they used hard sell and we didn't. But we don't know his top 3 things. They might not know either, but they guessed right and we didn't. So it's a big risk reward thing where you just have to make a decision. And honestly, if you are comfortable making that decision and potentially losing out even sooner, that's perfectly fine, right? Like the worst you're going to do is not get a guy that if you stayed put, you were already not going to get him, right? But if you guess right, then all of a sudden you're still in the race, and that is huge. So now we got 200 points to play with, and it really is a decision of, okay, who do we want to go after here? We have guys that we're the only ones going after them right now, so we really don't have to worry about anything. So I'm going to skip all the boring stuff the rest of the way. It is simply just a wash, rinse, repeat type system. There is nothing challenging about, hey, making sure I'm doing everything I possibly can to put all my points in this player, make sure they're on a visit before National Signing Day, and trying to get hard sell as soon as possible. It is just paying attention to detail and making sure that you're in those little races and understanding why the mechanics work the way they do so that you can put yourself in the best position to succeed. Where I do think I did a bad job in this video of explaining to you how you actually build out the entire class rather than just the top of your class is that I had so many unused points every single week that I could have been going after 4-stars who maybe weren't getting a ton of love. 3-stars that weren't getting a ton of love that were good, solid players. Like those 3-stars are going to be in those mid-70s to low 70s. They are still really, really good players. As you can see, we finished tied for the third most 4-star recruits. If we had built out our entire recruiting class to get 3-stars as well, we would have been higher than 18th. But we were 18th just on 4-stars alone. We only had 9 recruits. That is insane. So if you follow those steps, you will be able to see the fruits of your labor in really insanely good transfer classes that will boost your overall, even though you had 12, 13, 14, 20 guys leave. So that's the key here, right? We want to focus on the process over the results. Now, the results here were phenomenal. We didn't get any of the big name players we were going after, but we got a lot of really, really good 4-star players that are going to be in those low to mid 80s, maybe even high 80s. Those are players that are going to play immediately year one for us and contribute and be big time players. Again, be smart about going after those 3-stars as well. You don't have a ton of time to do it though. And that's the key, is understanding when you're out of a race. If I were to do this video over again, I would not go after Cam Coleman, because that was a race that I had no shot in. Once I saw after the first simulated week that I was 5th on his board, but LSU had essentially an entire 3-week lead on me, take him off. Same thing with Fluff Bothwell. Like, there are just guys on here that I kept on for the sake of keeping on rather than taking them off and going after good 3-star players that are going to round out my entire class. Theoretically speaking, with the amount of points that Maryland has, the 1,200 points a week, I could have probably finished with a transfer class of 25 or 26 players. Like, that is, and I fully believe that I could have done that, because you only need to be in first place at the end of those 4 weeks. You don't have to have them committed. And there are so many 3-star players that are underscouted, that are not being attacked in the way that the 4-stars are, that you can really slide in there and make some big plays there. So you really want to focus on building up the rest of your roster as well as the top of it. Get those game-changing elite players by doing this, but all those excess points that you have week in and week out, use to fill out the rest of your roster, so that way you're not going in with a 9 transfer portal class and however many high school recruits you get. So that is what I got for you guys today. Thank you all so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Catch you on the flip. See ya.